Hey, everybody. So here's a clip from the most popular podcaster pretty much in the world.
Here's the thing. Any medication, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm a moron. And I'm a cage fighting commentator who's a dirty stand-up comedian who just told you I'm drunk most of the time. And I do testosterone and I smoke a lot of weed. But I'm not a respected source of information, even for me. If I say things, I'm always going, check on that, Jamie. I don't know if that's true. I do that all the time.
Right.
But I at least try to be honest about what I'm saying.
Or what you feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Joe Rogan, folks.
God, can you believe it?
It's wild, right? It's interesting. It's very interesting. So today we're going to talk about Joe Rogan, right? And I think it's important for us to kind of talk about who he is and the latest controversy around him. But, we're just going to go back and forth and discuss him and discuss what's going on with Joe Rogan. So first of all, I think, not everybody is going to know who Joe Rogan is, who listens to our podcast, perhaps, because our podcast listeners are only the most erudite of erudite people. And they there's an SAT word for you. So of course they don't know who Joe Rogan is. So who is Joe Rogan?
Listen, I believe our
Answer my
audience.
question.
Wait a minute. Our audience is a lot of things, but liars they are not. So if you don't know who, and this is just going to be for this week of Wednesday, February the 2nd, 2020. If you don't know who Joe Rogan is, and you send us an email, I will mail you out the first 5 listeners that are honest, right? I believe you. A copy of Stephen Rogelberg's book, The Surprising Science of Meetings, okay? Because you deserve something good if you've missed this guy for a while. So sorry, Ben. Where were we?
Well, we're explaining who is Joe Rogan. You can take a crack at describing him, and then I'll fill in kind of how I see Joe Rogan.
Well, so I learned some stuff about Joe Rogan this week, actually.
No, not what you learned about him. So who is he? Just describe.
No, I learned about who he is. I didn't know he hosted the Fear Factor.
Oh, yeah. That's how I first came to know of him.
Yeah. Ben, why are you watching that kind of trash television?
It was very engrossing.
What is Fear Factor? I had to go.
Are you serious? No, it was like a decade and a half ago or so. Like, it was a show where people go on and they do all this crazy stuff, jump off of things. And the worst ones were they would eat like really strange things like live earthworms and stuff. But anyway, the premise of the show was that you would do things that you were scared of. And then the people who overcame those and kind of beat out their competitors, they won. Well, anyway, Joe Rogan, he hosted that show, Fear Factor. He did a few other TV things back in the day. He's also been very involved in the mixed martial arts scene. He still works for UFC. He does, I think, some announcing and so forth and calls the different fights and whatnot.
That's where I started to hear about.
Okay.
And in the UFC stuff.
And so he's also, I think probably the biggest, he's a comedian. So he does stand-up comedy. He does Brazilian jiu-jitsu himself, I think. So that's why he's probably fairly decent.
Dude's in shape. Yeah. He's in shape.
So I think he got more in shape recently, but yeah, so he's done all that stuff. And then, a few years ago, started podcasting, and his podcast has just exploded, right? So, one way to look at a podcast popularity, like I don't know how many actual downloads he's getting every month because I'm not behind the scenes on what he's doing, but it's estimated that he has about 11 million members in his podcast audience. So maybe just a couple million more than the Indigo podcast. He has 11.8 million subscribers on YouTube, right? And we actually saw an article in The Atlantic talking about Joe Rogan from about 2 years ago. And I believe at that time they said that he had 6 million subscribers on YouTube. So he's doubled his popularity on YouTube, at least, his subscribers. And his list of people that he has had on his podcast as guests is rather long, and it is a full spectrum of types of folks. So, that I guess that's a little bit about who Joe Rogan is, from kind of the things he does perspective. There's a whole lot more that I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell. So there's this Atlantic article that I read and prepping for this. We'll put it in the show notes, but they divided his guests into three groups. Comedians, he brings a lot of comedians on,
Right.
which my buddy Tom that lives down the road from me, said he loved his comedy. Like it's
Mhm.
pretty good. And that, he will call people out for stealing other people's jokes. Like
That's a big no-no in the world of comedy, for
right.
sure.
But and he's like,
Yeah.
he has a philosophical upper hand when it comes to the art of comedy. And apparently he's just above board in that section. So thanks for letting me know about that, Tom. But he started podcasting back when podcasting was kind of nascent and building up, right? So I don't know. Where were we? What were we saying about
Well,
Joe?
who is Joe Rogan? That's who he is.
Three groups. He has three
Yeah, the
groups. So
three
he has
groups.
comedians he'll bring on.
Mhm.
He'll bring fighters because he calls fighting, and the guy can call an MMA level match like you can't believe. It's riveting. You could listen to it on radio. That's how good he is.
Mhm.
So comedians, fighters, and the group they just kind of called thinkers. This is everybody from like
Good thinkers and bad thinkers.
Yeah. Thinkers, the rest of the jackwagons. But like he's had legit Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Righteous Mind, has been a guest on his podcast. That is some seminal research into moral foundations theory. I mean, I would even say yes. If Joe called me up, that'd never happen. But right, like,
Well,
he gets who he wants because he's so big.
He has such a platform that if you get on that show, you're going to sell more of your books. You're going to get more subscribers to whatever you have. It's one of those things, right? And that brings us to kind of, what is this latest controversy involving Joe Rogan? Now, this is not the first time probably that he's been involved in some sort of controversy, but it has broiled to a level that I think it hasn't been before. So what's going on with Joe, and what's the story?
I don't know. Let me Google it real quick. No, I'm just
Seriously?
kidding. No. So the latest controversy, which I'm surprised that this one has as much brouhaha, because I think some of his earlier controversies were worse, is his vaccine stances.
Yeah. He has like this weird stance on vaccines where he says that he was all set up to get the vaccine, but then it just didn't work out from his schedule wise, and then a variety of skepticism that he's talked about the COVID vaccine on his podcast and so forth, and due to that, and then other people who he has on his show who maybe he doesn't challenge when they say something that's not substantiated by reality or whatever, has really gotten some people angry. And here's the backstory that other people should know, right? So about a year or two or so ago, I don't know exactly when, he signed a $100 million deal with Spotify. Now, some of our podcast listeners might be listening to us via Spotify. At the time, Spotify was not huge in podcasting. They were mainly just for streaming music. They still stream music, but then they really want to get into podcasting. And they said, hey, here's one way to do it. Let's get an exclusive with the big podcaster, Joe Rogan. $100 million. He's in, he's doing that. And now people are like, well, maybe this isn't something that we want to be associated with. And by we, I'm talking about musicians and stuff. So Neil Young, if you all know who Neil Young is, Neil Young, of mainly a 70s type rocker, right? Good stuff there. Some good songs, some not so good songs. But anyway, he said, hey, Spotify, it's either me or Joe Rogan. And he basically said, if you don't kick him off, I'm leaving. And then Neil Young decided to leave. I think a handful of others have left Spotify. I think Brene Brown, who is she's a social work researcher, and a lot of people are probably familiar with her. Probably more of our podcast listeners probably know who Brene Brown is than know who Joe Rogan is. But I think she has left Spotify because they're like, hey, I can't be associated with this. And part of the controversy, I think, is around what control a platform should or should not have over a person on that platform, what they say. He does say some irresponsible stuff, and he has guests on who and he gives them a platform that I think is irresponsible. He has in the past. But this controversy is really kind of bringing a lot of issues to the forefront.
Well, the thing is, Ben, and all right, I'm going to get a little meta here. Spotify is a platform for audio,
Right.
right? And they do have some music videos and stuff, but it's pretty much a platform for audio. Joe Rogan is a platform. He's so big. He is a platform on top of a platform. And let me tell you why I think that matters. One, so there's a decision. Spotify's like, hey, listen, Apple's killing us on the podcast front. We want in. Let's just write a really big check.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk to Joe and they're like, hey, listen, we got to get rid of a few of your episodes. And Joe's like, for $100 million, I think it was 40 episodes, right? $100 million, sure. Heck, I'm drunk and high and just talking about stuff anyway. I don't even remember what's in those episodes, probably, you know? And so it's gone. But it was a big stink because a lot of people over one of his earlier controversies, which was calling the Sandy Hook school shooting massacre, he brought on this guy named Alex Jones, who's a complete waste of a human individual. Somebody's going to send me hate mail for that, but he is a bad dude who said that that was a government conspiracy to come take your guns. Right. And so like, that's the level. So, you know, you have a bunch of software developers that are saying, I don't want this guy on. I don't want to be in a company that brings this guy in. Right. So that's one level of the platform conversation. Should Spotify have written such a big check to somebody that does that? But then there's another layer. It's the Joe Rogan layer. And that's who he chooses to bring on, right? It's a platform, Spotify. And when you cross the 10 million listener episode, I mean, he is the biggest podcast in the world. He's a platform to himself. He has editorial choice about who he gets to bring on.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Right.
But let me tell you why I think that matters, Ben, it'd be one thing if he was putting the screws to these guys. Like, hey, Alex, you call this? There are parents grieving the loss of their kids that aren't alive anymore. Or, right? You know, watching a interviewer who's prepared and really asking the tough questions is different than what Joe does.
Right. So what Joe does typically on his podcast, so I've listened to a couple of his podcasts, not many. And the reason I don't listen to many of them is because, you know, I don't really care to listen to.
They're horrible.
Well, yeah, I actually don't think they're that good, right? Sometimes you'll have an interesting person on, and sometimes the clips, so you'll take a lot of the clips and put them on his YouTube channel, which sometimes those can be interesting. But you know, it's usually like 2 to 3 hours of just kind of back and forth rambling content where he's going back and forth, just having a really casual conversation with people. And the problem is when you have somebody on who has views that need to be challenged, right? Or things that are completely outside of the mainstream, and, you know, where a normal, I suppose, hard-hitting journalist would ask the hard questions. Joe doesn't do that, at least not in what I've seen. And that creates some issues. Now, you bring up Spotify, right? So Spotify has this problem. I'm just going to recap a little bit of this from Spotify's perspective in the most recent news that I've found. And this comes from CNN Business, and this was just coming out today. And today, as of this recording, is February 2nd, 2022. It says, Spotify CEO Daniel Ek addressed the controversy around comedian and podcast host Joe Rogan on Wednesday, saying that the company is, quote, trying to balance creative expression with the safety of our users, end quote. Quote again, of course, this is a very complicated issue, X said in the company's post-earnings call on Wednesday, but I'm really proud of the steps that we took following the concerns raised by the medical and scientific communities. Right? Okay. So, now, here's the thing. Now, you know the answer to this, Chris. What did Spotify do? What did they do after Joni Mitchell and Neil Young said, we're pulling our music because we don't want to be on the same platform as Joe? Spotify did do something.
Well, they did the Facebook thing of, oh, we're only a platform, but we hear you.
Yeah. But
we hope Joni and Neil will come back. So they just said, sorry you feel that way. Hope y'all come back. And then they said, we'll put an advisory thing. Right. This is like the parental advice. So, right, Ben, our generation.
So what they said, following the backlash, Spotify said it is adding a content advisory to any podcast episode that includes discussion about COVID-19. The advisory will direct listeners to a COVID-19 hub that will include links to trusted sources, the company said. Okay, so that just seems
This will sell more records. This was the parental. If you had a rap or rock record, you would try to say some wordy dirds on your songs just so you could get that parental advisory, because kids didn't want the records without the, they want the stuff their parents don't want them to listen to.
I mean, I don't know if this would actually increase his audience, but it just seems to me as a kind of they're trying to thread this needle of, hey, we really want to keep Joe Rogan on here because everybody's listening to him. And at the same time, try to placate people who object to that, and as well as maybe try to stay, at least at a superficial level, be able to say that they're staying firm or true to their values. I don't know.
And what did Joe say? What did Joe say in response?
I'm not sure.
Do you remember?
What did Joe say?
He was like, hey, listen, guys, I don't really even prepare for these episodes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's like, why is anyone listening to me anyway?
This is like Willie Nelson. Do you know what his defense was about not paying taxes for all those years?
I think I remember this one, but
he's basically said he was high for all that time. And if anybody could mount that defense, it would be Willie Nelson. But guys, that does not fly. That doesn't fly in adult society.
Yeah.
You're like,
okay.
I'm an adult. I'm responsible.
So here's the thing. All right. So some of our listeners may not know who Joe Rogan is. Many of them may not listen to him. People may be wondering why should we even care about Joe Rogan if I don't know who he is? And why should I care what he does? He's just this, he's a celebrity. He does this thing. He says stupid stuff sometimes. What do you think? Why should we care about this?
I'm mixed on this, Ben. I don't have a settled thing on this. Now, just to give a scope, he's 3 to 4 times bigger the audience than the biggest talking head on Rachel Maddow, Tucker Carlson. That's how big Joe Rogan is. So everybody gets scandalized about what those numbskulls say on the television. He's 4x those guys.
Right.
But here's something we know from like a lot of different studies into social media and perception and all that kind of stuff, is people don't believe everything they read or hear. Right? And so here you've got a big audience. Now, I don't think if anybody, this is a chance that anybody would believe misinformation. Well, I don't believe in putting out misinformation. So like, that's not a calculus. Right? And so I have mixed reviews. Should we be scandalized? Well, I don't know. Like, on the one hand, it's good to know he wouldn't bring anybody with a small following on there, right? Like, none of his guests will be like obscure no names.
Yeah.
So in one way, it's a way to kind of know like what's going on out in the world of jack wagonry.
Yeah. Well, I think we should care about what's going on from perhaps the standpoint of, it's a reflection of society. It's a reflection of ourselves and the stuff that apparently a lot of people are valuing. And that it doesn't paint a great picture, right? It perhaps suggests that we should be caring about different things. And this is something you and I talk about a lot on this podcast, that we really should be caring about the things that really matter in life. We should think that things like truth and honesty and decency should matter. The good guys should win, all those kinds of things. But I don't know if those, they probably don't have the same appeal that Joe Rogan does. I don't know. I think it's.
But listen, let me throw something at you. His podcasts are like 2 to 5 hours long, right? And when we launched our podcast, how many people pushed back and said, "Whoa, an hour!" Ooh.
Right.
Right? Right. So what do you think? What do you think the kind of person that would listen to a 2 to 5 hour show? What's that format, Ben?
Well,
what do you think that is?
I mean, I think it's, I guess, first of all, I don't know how many, I don't know the data on his podcast, how many people actually listen to the whole thing all the way through. or if they just catch pieces here and there, or if they mainly digest it in those smaller clips on YouTube. But let's imagine that someone is listening for the whole time, start to finish. I think there would need to be an element of unpredictability, where you were kind of like, well, what's going to happen next, right? So you'd keep listening,
but not the content.
right?
What kind of person would digest a 5-hour episode? What's that person doing or thinking?
Yeah, I don't know.
He's probably, this is my guess. I like to listen to talk radio or something like that if I'm doing a big construction job. Or if I'm driving a long distance, right?
Yeah, you might put something on that takes a long time.
Got to mow the lawn. You got to, a back 40 to mow. Like, these are people, and I've talked to some people, they actually love that it's long form.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's long form with really, let's be honest, interesting people.
He does have interesting people on occasionally, right? And
he's funny. He's a comedian, for God's sake.
He is funny. He kind of has this part of his persona is he just says stuff. And I think a lot of us kind of wish that we could just go say stuff, but most of us probably have a little bit more of a compass. In terms
Ben
of
wishes I had more of a compass, but
we're working on you.
We're working on it.
By the way, our podcast listeners should know that recently my son and I went to a Cleveland Monsters game, which is minor league hockey here in town. And as a gift to people, sometimes they give like little things when you come into an arena or a stadium. They're giving out Dave Grohl bobbleheads, and I'm showing it to Chris right now over the video. And I'm going to use this. So there's a great clip on YouTube. Maybe we should put this in the show notes of Dave Grohl talking about songwriting, saying, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus." And so when I feel like Chris is rambling a little bit, I'm just going to hold up the Dave Grohl and we'll see if that helps.
Gosh, Ben, like we're just showing them all how the sausage is made now. Gosh. By the way, we'll put that in the show notes, but there is a bad word in that YouTube video, so don't click on it if you care about. Yeah.
Oh boy.
But so here's the thing, right? He's funny. It's long form, we want to talk about the important stuff. But I remember I grew up in both mainstream denominations and evangelical denominations. But when I got to the evangelical denominations, every Super Bowl Sunday, attendance would wane. And you could see the pastor looking out there and be like, oh my God, my flock is eating hot wings and watching obtuse commercials with their friends and not getting God's word in their heart right now. And then invariably, I've had several sermons about it, I don't like to feel like that poor pastor who, no matter how many, dude, you're giving the sermon you should give it the following Sunday when all those Super Bowl skip outs are actually in the pews. Don't give that sermon to the people that showed up. But I don't want to feel like I'm reprimanding people for watching Joe Rogan. Because, how do you, not everybody believes everything they hear and read. He is an entertaining, funny guy. So, only a few people, I see you moving your arm. I'm like, shoot, is he getting the Grohl statue again? But it's like, I know, you got to sit still, Ben, because I think you're reaching for the statue. I don't know how to think about the impact of Joe Rogan on his negative impacts.
Yeah, so I think okay. I kind of see where you're going there. I think, so I guess the question perhaps is, okay, out of the maybe 11 million people listening to Joe Rogan, if he says something anti-vaccine, how many of them are actually going to reduce their inclination to get the vaccine? Or perhaps some other view, are they going to actually adopt it? And that'd be a very hard thing to tell, right? That's an empirical question, but it'd be a very hard one to investigate. But I think it is interesting, and maybe we can move to this now, to think about, okay, well, why is Joe Rogan popular, right? So we're saying that he has these kind of rambly podcasts. He has interesting people on. We said, he's funny. But why, what explains the popularity, do you think?
Well, I don't know, because some people are saying, I don't know if his audience is primarily dudes, right? because I was talking to my wife about this, and she said, "Oh yeah, I would listen to him occasionally," and I was surprised. And I said, "Well, how? Why?" Like, because she doesn't watch MMA stuff. She's
Mhm.
not into the comedian stuff. She's like, "Well, I just saw that he was the number one podcast, so I thought the number one podcast would surely be valuable." Not, not a, actually not.
It's plausible.
It's
Yeah.
plausible. And had a Tom down the street, same guy. He said, "Well, I knew he's a comedian. I'd listen to him. I appreciated that he did long form."
Right.
But after 10 or 12 episodes, I was like, wait a minute, what's with this content? And he dumped them.
Yeah.
So, some of his popularity is self-reinforcing, success. Success begets, if you
Sure.
can be number one for a week, you're going to be in the top 40 for 10 weeks as
Yeah.
a songwriter or something.
Right. So, I mean, he already was popular when he started his podcast. He already had a platform from various other ventures and things he had done in his life. So, that kind of helped him launch. I think part of the appeal of Joe Rogan, perhaps to some people, is, as we mentioned, he says things that maybe some of us wish we had that own freedom of speech. We didn't have that filter. He just kind of says stuff. So there's kind of that shock value, and he's funny when he does it. He also, I think, seems, at least from the interactions that he has with his guests, he seems likable and kind of an interesting, funny guy. Um, but what's interesting then to think about is, why might someone? This goes back to that question of, do people actually change their behavior based upon perhaps bad information that he's putting out there? Do they and would they find Joe Rogan credible on topics that are outside of his domain of expertise? Like, I would trust him if he said something that was related to fighting or the art of comedy, right? Those types of things. You and I trusted him in terms of choice of microphones to record podcasts. Remember when we were starting this podcast, we were like, "Well, what does Joe Rogan use?" Okay, we'll do, and that worked, right? But why might they find him credible on this other stuff? And I think it kind of goes to this, where, if we think about where power comes from, the sources of power that we have, there are a handful of sources of power. One of them is, if someone is an expert, if they're a deep expert on something, we tend to, see them as more powerful. We tend to be more influenced by them. So power's one. If someone has legitimate authority, like, that's one reason why we might be influenced by them too. If they're like our boss and they could legitimately, they have that control over us. If they can reward us with stuff, if they can punish us, right? But Joe doesn't have any of that. None of those are his sources of power. What his source of power is, it's what we call referent power. It's like people kind of identify with him and are like, yeah, he's kind of cool. I wouldn't mind kind of being like him in these certain types of ways or whatever. And so I think that's kind of how people, why they like him. And perhaps, we like to kind of believe things that are said by people whom we like. So it's this kind of interesting psychological thing that I think happens. But here's where I think it's problematic. It's that Joe Rogan himself should be more responsible in his own behavior, right?
Well, but I think that might turn people off.
Oh, of course it would. I'm not talking about what calculus he's making for his own popularity.
Like, if
right?
It's important, COVID is important. Not making people who are grieving, not giving a platform to somebody who would say it's a conspiracy theory that their kid is dead.
Right.
Like, that is just beyond. Matter of fact, if he had stood up and said, "You know what, get out of my studio, you piece of garbage," or
right.
something. Okay, that episode would be fine. But he's really friendly to those guys. But I really tried to steel man or play devil's advocate of how, is it that bad? Does everybody believe everything Joe says? And I don't think so, because the smart people I know said, yeah, I checked him out and then I bounced after a few episodes,
Right.
because it's stupid. It's a brain rot.
Yep.
But so then what's that leave? All the brain rot zombies listening to him. And what's interesting is watching, right? Donald Trump. Vaccine was developed under his tenure in office. And when he went out to some of these public events, he said, guys, go get vaccinated. And they booed him. Right? And so everybody in the media and like a lot of people on the left said, he's a Pied Piper. Whatever he says, the right's going to eat up. And that just wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
He could not get his followers to go get vaccinated, right? And so I don't think Joe Rogan, so yes, he has a huge platform. The smart people leaves, that leaves the Joe Numbskulls and the couple people that just discover him before they hit a bad episode. It leaves the Numbskulls behind. But I don't think he has carte blanche control over the Numbskulls. So as long as he brings, and this is why I kind of slide against Joe Rogan. Not only does he make morally poor decisions under the guise of, hey, I'm just telling the story like it is, or free speech, he amplifies a piece of the puzzle that keeps people going after garbage, fake, false, conspiracy, nutbaggery that's out there.
Right.
So he may not be able to turn the ship, but he definitely stokes the coals. And that's why I'm just like, this guy is bad for the US. And what is he doing it? Let's just look at his motivations, right? I've got thousands of episodes, $100 million. You want to delete 40? It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
They have quotes of him telling people, hey, it's Spotify. We can say whatever we want. I'm drunk and high. I don't even do research before I start. He will bring anybody with a platform on or a big enough audience and capture some of those guys. But the remaindermen, so to speak, the people that are there, it creates a community for a bunch of detritus.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there are a number of questions that one could ask about this whole thing with Joe Rogan and with Spotify. You know, what is the role of a platform in these situations? What even is a platform? You could argue, you know, what does it mean for, someone to get canceled, like the whole cancel culture stuff. And the
Everybody
various
who's ever
meanings
been
that has.
canceled, I still get to hear about them.
Yeah, so
So they're not even canceled.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of ways to think about cancel culture. I think,
Yeah.
in the way that you're thinking about it, right? That's funny. I think, the other piece though is, do we want to support and do we want to have more or less of people out there who are appealing to the worst parts of humanity in some instances? And I think it's junk food. This is a lot of what he's serving. And I just, that's what turns me off. And I think the lack of responsibility that he takes for his own content, for the guests that he chooses to have, is problematic. And whether or not that gets sorted out by Spotify and the market in some way, we will see. But I do think that we as people should be aware that that's what's going on, and perhaps try to fill our minds with things that are better.
Yeah, if I'm talking to the Spotify board of directors or whatever, that I'm like, and if I'm talking to that CEO as a member of the board, I'm like, you spent $100 million for this? What did the second most popular podcast?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
I mean, but the thing is like, I don't think as a platform necessarily you're looking at the content of what you're bringing on more than you're looking at, oh, this brings me this many listeners, this brings me these types of advertisers. And that's probably that. I mean, that was a strategic choice that they made.
Yeah, a short-sighted one.
Right.
You can make a lot. How many people would recommend, hey, son, Pornhub makes a lot of money. Why don't you start a business like that when you grow up? Nobody.
Hope not.
And that's because you're like, come on. Yeah. So it's like, what were you thinking? Moral choices matter. And some of this stuff, I don't know. Here's another piece I was thinking about with Joe, is we see in real time what I would call layman's rules of life, right? Where somebody will say, here's one, free speech. And I surveyed some of my friends by text. I think free speech should be absolute. If you don't like it, you don't have to listen to it. And I say, well, okay, well, what if I make a convincing website and say, this person was a realtor and I said, you're a murderer. You could sue me for libel and slander, right? And they're like, well, what? I mean, do you think we should get rid of libel and slander laws? What if I'm so big that I can squash you? I have 1 million followers so that anybody that wants to come to your town and use you as a realtor would be like, oh my God, is this realtor a murderer?
Right.
Oh, well, I guess not. But then that wouldn't be free speech, would it? And that is like now, a lot of people don't spend time thinking about this stuff. I remember my hermeneutics professor when I was in theology school in undergrad said, listen, people have to work. They have kids. They try to watch a little bit of trash TV, go to bed and work again the next day. They don't have time to research the nuances of better philosophical argument. So that's why they hired you, the pastor, to go help them and guide them and provide some cliff notes but at the end of the day, anybody with kid knows sometimes you get to the end of that day and be like, oh my God, everybody's alive. I'll take it. Maybe it's a C- for the day, but I'll take it. We'll go to bed and try again tomorrow. And a lot of people have that. So they don't. So what I see Joe Rogan do in his episodes is he brings that layman kind of thing. I'm going to do my own research with Google. And he'll do it real time in his stuff, but the way he's researching stuff is bad. It's not somebody that knows how to deal with peer-reviewed literature.
Right. Yeah, so Joe Rogan is an interesting character. He is certainly a popular character, and this controversy that he's going through right now, I think perhaps has the potential to shape, how we think about all of these considerations around what platforms put out there and so forth. I have heard some people say, oh, people are just trying to cancel Joe Rogan and so forth. I'm not buying that argument, really.
Actually, some people like that he's on Spotify, because if he was on another platform, he'd have a bigger reach. So Spotify, some people are kicking fire on your business model here. Joe lost a lot of people when he brought it under the Spotify only hood. Right. And I don't know if Spotify is going to realize the return on that investment. But other people that just hate him and think he's straight, it's like, man, that's fine. He's on Spotify. Ain't nobody listen to podcasts on that platform.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we have next to 0 listeners on Spotify. We're listed there because we list everywhere.
Yeah, we're mainly Apple Podcasts. But yeah, so all right. So let's try to pull this thing together and wrap it in a bow. What do you think listeners should take away from this? Why should they care? What do you think?
Well, I think they should care because they should know about the media landscape, right? You need to know what's out there. And it's about encouraging the better stuff, Like, Ben, it's like if we had to say, like, Joe Rogan was a giant cancer, what would it take to stop him, Ben? If we all decided we want to stop Joe Rogan today, what would have to happen?
Well, I mean, it could happen in a couple different ways.
Legally. That would legally stop Joe Rogan. Right.
Yeah. I mean, everybody would have to stop listening to him. Right?
Yeah. Nobody go try to run Joe Rogan over with your Vespa or something. Right.
No,
okay.
Of course not. Yeah. I mean, people just have to stop listening to him, stop giving him, giving him the platform, because these platforms don't just happen. I mean, people provide that by listening, by tuning in, by sharing, all of that kind of stuff. I think that's probably what it would take. I don't know if that's, I don't know. Does he provide an amusing feature of society that's tolerable? I don't know. I think I would say he's a net negative for the world. At least
trending
podcast.
Down.
Right. At least his podcast, because of the irresponsibility that he has with regard to guest selection and how he treats important topics.
And I think you could have any guest on there, but it's the way you conduct that interview. And that's his responsibility.
Well,
right?
Yeah,
so it's like guest selection,
right.
Fine, anybody. But then you have a responsibility to handle that guest well, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are, I think there are certain people that you would not want to even give the platform to. I mean, you and I have had this conversation with a guest for our podcast. There have been people who were like, I don't think so, right?
But well, our stuff's easy. Anybody, we turn down everybody pretty much. There have been like 2 people we've had that were like, okay.
Yeah, I think that's literally true. I think we proactively go out to get our guests. It doesn't happen the other way around usually. Now,
Yeah.
if you're an awesome person, feel free
And
to
still hit us up.
still hit us up for sure. Yeah.
One of the things that was interesting to me as I was talking to my buddy Ramirez that lives in Alabama, we used to be in a military unit together. He said, back in the day, you'd have to face a little bit of embarrassment or social stigma if you're at the checkout at the grocery and you reach over and you bring down the National Enquirer and kind of put that between your milk and eggs, right? Even the pimpled faced teenager there who doesn't know anything's going to look at you like, really, guy? National Enquirer? Like,
Right.
He doesn't know anything. He's making minimum wage and he's judging you, right? There used to be some social stigma. But now that we have the web, everybody that's curious about that can just click away with no judgment, right?
Yeah.
And we see this. Where do we see this? On the little ads that are
The little clickbait
plague
ads,
everything. It's like they'll have somebody about what happened to this TV star from the 70s, and they're in like some revealing shirt or something. Or Obama's going to give you a free cell phone and a $400,000 house for $12 a month, and it has a dancing person there, right? Right.
Highly educated singles in your zip code.
Right. I don't know what you're surfing on the web, Ben, that you get those ads. I'm just busting. Everybody gets those ads, right? So those ads are the tabloid fodder, and there's something in the human psyche that just kind of like, I'm going to click that, right? And gosh, it's bad. So now we have just basically trash entertainment from somebody who acknowledges, I don't even do prep, from somebody through countless episodes shows that they lack the very fundamental pieces of how to think and parse information. Why would you waste your time? Why? And second piece on that, right, is we did that episode where we talked about media images, like the Facebook data about Instagram and stuff is making people depressed, right? Way back in the day, right? Magazines, Cosmo, Redbook, I don't know. All those people say these magazines create unrealistic expectations for women. But now the magazines are pretty much gone. They're trash. They have like some kind of web footprint, but whatever. Now you see people on Instagram creating that whole jealousy porn genre for themselves. Now who are you going to blame? And so to your point, Ben, Joe Rogan is a mirror of who we are, or some people in our society are, i.e. enough to make him the most popular podcast in the world.
Right.
And so we don't get better content until we stop watching trash. You just won't.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing that I would suggest if I were saying to one of my kids or something, here's what you should be thinking about Joe Rogan. It would be, hey, look, you need to be careful and evaluate what you're listening to, evaluate what you're watching. And there are better ways probably to spend your time, better sources of information. Now, if you're looking for a laugh, maybe a comedian's the place to, or the person to listen to, but probably not when you're looking for information about how to live your life or about how to take care of yourself or about how to treat other people necessarily.
And the stuff you fill your mind with, you only have we talked about, hey, I'm so busy, I'm working. By the time I get home, I'm going to watch I'm going to fall asleep in front of the TV and then hope to God I make it through this week the next day. Well, why would you take your limited hours and invest it on this guy? Oh my God. And if we have any other listeners that think, yeah, dude, this is why, I'd love to hear from you. I may even call you up, like, why would somebody go with Joe Rogan? And it's like, I don't know, like if you have somebody you care for in your life who's a Joe Rogan fan,
Hmm.
how do you stage an intervention?
I'm not sure. And I'm not even sure you need to. But, today we have talked here on the Indigo Podcast about a different podcast, which is the Joe Rogan Experience. And I think it's an important topic for us all to be aware of, especially when it comes to thinking about the media landscape and how we consume all of the information that's out there. Thanks for listening to the Indigo Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider helping us by rating us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, telling your friends about us, having us on your podcast, or mentioning us on social media. Our website is www.indigopodcast.com, where you can access more information about us and this episode. Thanks again, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.